Welcome, everybody, to 5 tips for successful engineering project management. With us today, we've got Gary Hinkle, and I'm really excited because Gary and I've known each other for decades, both as colleagues and serving on a board of directors for the Program Management Forum. A lot of fun here, certainly digging into what happens, especially with engineering projects. So a lot of you know us at Advisicon. Basically, we do business transformation, whether it's technical or business or process or both. So we always love helping people out and learning new things, which is why we love giving back to our community of practice. With me, as I mentioned, is Gary, one of the founding members of Auxilium. Gary, do you want to just tell everyone about your organization and what you do, and then we'll dig into our topics?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Auxilium, we also help organizations go faster, but sometimes it's better product development, better products, almost always more efficient. We focus on companies that do hardware-based products and systems involving mechanical, electronics, software, and firmware, usually. Sometimes they're pure software projects. The common thing that all companies have that we help is they're very engineering oriented, and engineering leadership has been our focus area since day one, really helping, and this is mostly what we do through training and coaching, help engineering leaders be more successful as leaders and, in particular, to help them with their product development challenges.
Awesome.
There's a QR code there for learning more.
Lots of good stuff. Hey, and by the way, everyone, Gary has a lot of content, webinars that they do as well. So Auxilium has quite a bit of information out there, especially if you're in that engineering space, which is really a complex environment. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tim Brunsey. I'm the CEO and founder of Advisicon. I've been serving in our community of practice for over 30 years, and I will tell you, it just still feels like, once you've got a lot of things figured out, then you find something new, and your students humble you all the time with great questions. So it's just my pleasure to be here, and then just a great opportunity to kind of hear from Gary. Gary, tell them a little bit about your background, you specifically, and what you're going to be bringing to the table today for us with kind of your background.
Yeah, I started as an engineer many years ago now, electronics and software engineering. I got into leadership roles early in my career, and I liked it, so I stuck with it. And I was a student of leadership, management, product development, always learning, seminars, reading. And I wanted to be like a sponge and learn as much as I could. And then after working in leadership roles in engineering and product development in different companies for a long time, I decided I wanted to teach people what I knew, and started Auxilium really mostly as a training company, and specifically wanting to help engineers with leadership challenges, because leading in an engineering environment, which is really complex, has challenges that are often more difficult than maybe your average environment because of the complexity. So I really wanted to help with that. But over the 22 years I've been at this, of the full range of situations we've experienced, helping individuals, helping teams with their product development challenges, helping whole organizations transform. And in recent years, it's been more helping with an agile way of working, because that's becoming more preferred in the hardware space. And so our engineering leadership program evolved to what we call today our Agile engineering leadership program, because of the Agile project management aspects, but also because people in leadership roles need to be agile from a leadership perspective as well. So that is an important aspect of leadership. So that all kind of goes together, with agility being important in project management and in leadership. And more specifically, on the project management side, in the last 10 years or so, we've been developing what we call the modified Agile for hardware development framework. So
MAD, right?
Mad. We've gone mad helping hardware companies be successful with Agile.
What's interesting about both project management, program portfolio management is the fact, especially in engineering, where people are successful. A successful engineer is very detail oriented in many cases, but as they get promoted, the Peter principle sometimes comes into place where engineering leadership is different than engineering management or tactical engineering delivery. And when we look at that project management space of how to manage and some of the key things that makes it successful, this is where I think, Gary, you're going to weave today a little bit more around the Agile approach to help allow you to certainly deliver and be visible. So again, thanks again for being here. And our topics today we're going to dig into is what is unique about engineering project management. We are going to talk about some of the specific challenges. And I think this is where we just are kind of skating around the top of the iceberg, if you will. This can be very deep, but in general, there's some really top level things that surface. And then Gary's going to dig in deeper on, talking about leveraging Agile with engineering. And then some of the key tips, tricks, shortcuts, as well as common questions that come up. So without further ado, let's get in here and let's talk a little bit about what's unique about engineering project management. Now, for those of you that have taken classes or gone to our website or purchased some of our flowcharts, as you remember, whether it's waterfall project management, Prince2, whether it's an Agile or a system software development lifecycle, a process is really important. I think this is something that's going to key into is that you're not necessarily stuck, or even if you're using an Agile methodology where you have a lot of that iteration. I think this is where I just want to encourage people that if you haven't put something in place, this is one of the success factors that we'll be talking about a little bit later on. But Gary, what's unique? Tell us what are some of the key characteristics that you've picked up over the years.
Right. Well, before I dive into this, something you just said is very true. You said Peter principle. A lot of engineers who get promoted or somehow end up in leadership and project management or both kind of, situations, typically, right away, they don't have experience, but they often don't get a lot of training. But I think most are going to struggle for a while without understanding there's a balance that's really important. In an engineering leadership role, there's the combination of technical, it's still engineering, and there's a technical aspect. But letting others do more of that and really focus on the management aspect, which there is a lot of complexity related to project management. And one of the challenges in finding the balance, I think, is what are the tools, build a toolkit and know which tools to use in certain situations. But the leadership is really the hardest part, and it's a lifelong endeavor to really develop leadership ability. And I think most engineers struggle with that balance, letting go of the technical, learning enough about project management, and also delegating or getting help, in certain areas, and really being focused on the leadership is a challenge. And what doesn't make it easy is engineering-oriented work is really complicated. And that is really the main thing that's unique about engineering project types is the complexity. If you look here, the first 3 rows, I consider all to be engineering types of projects, starting with the third one, IT and software projects. A lot of times they're described as engineering projects, and pure software projects can be very complex without any hardware aspect. But the typical situation is a continuous release, constantly evolving the software, and an Agile or a Scrum type of approach works for a lot of software development. It's a natural fit because of that continuous release. The construction projects have an engineering aspect, but most construction projects, simplicity and not reinventing something is what most construction projects are about. Very little engineering, make it as predictable as possible, and especially in terms of managing the costs, get it according to plan. But new product development involving hardware has the manufacturing aspect. And that is a whole another level of complexity, to make the product manufacturable, to manage the manufacturing costs. Sometimes construction is part of manufacturing, building a new factory or rebuilding part of a factory in order to manufacture the new product. And then a lot of those products involve software too. That's a very important part of the product. So that manufacturing and cost aspect, to manage it from an engineering project management perspective, that's what's really unique compared to non-engineering projects, especially like social, focused on people, research, typically not a timeline or schedule, but still goal oriented. So we've got, figure out how to get the project done on time, on budget, and deal with all the manufacturing aspects. That's what makes new product development rather unique.
I find, Gary, spot on, right? Because a lot of times when you think about an engineering project, you might have a mixture of distribution, you have infrastructure, you have to continually release and monitor, measure, and update. You might have hardware and software mixed in there as well. So you really have a lot of ingredients kind of put in there, and that puts a lot of pressure. In fact, I remember being as an MVP, a project MVP specifically, sitting in a room kind of at the feet of Bill Gates. And I'm not kidding when I say the feet of Bill Gates. He was standing there probably 8-9 feet away and talking to us about what was going on from an engineering perspective on how he intended to continue to engineer and grow their company. Now, this is back mid-2000s. And myself and a couple others asked the question, which was, hey, look, Xbox is coming out, but you're a software company. Why are you actually building hardware and putting it out there? And he said, well, we identified that there was a significant market. We give away the hardware for free so we could sell the software. And so suddenly you have, which was a pure software development, now mixing hardware. And that was an interesting environment for us to actually help deploy Project Server, and back in the day, help them kind of begin scheduling, because developers and gamers, that is not about scheduling, right? Or complex project management. They just want to get in and have fun and do things, but yet you have to make sure you deliver on time and on schedule, especially if you have a release cadence that says Christmas is coming and this has to be out by a specific time frame. So
absolutely.
Some of the challenges, I think this is one of the things we talk about, what makes engineering project management more complex. But what are some of the challenges that people, if they haven't already experienced this or be working through this, that they will be running into? And then we'll kind of relate that back to, I'm assuming, the solutions or approaches to help address some of these.
Well, the first one is both engineering-centric and cross-disciplined. And being engineering-centric, people who aren't engineers don't understand much about engineering. So you've got people working in other functions who just don't get engineering. And then with other disciplines, mechanical engineers are not electronics experts typically, and vice versa. And, so each discipline has its own unique challenges that aren't well understood by other groups. I mean, that's one aspect. The dependencies are rather complicated typically because of those different disciplines involved, and other functions. You've got supply chain and manufacturing and quality and product management. You've got all these teams that really need to work together well. And that's the project management challenge, is to cross-functionally to pull it all together in some way so that, cross-functionally it works really well. And there really aren't that many project managers who are good at that. And mainly because of the complexity of the project. The technical challenges, engineers are usually all over that. But from a project management perspective, new innovation is always going to be unpredictable. But typically there's schedule pressure for good reason. I can't think of one off the top of my head project that I've been involved with in the last 20 years where schedule didn't matter. They're very rare situations. So making the right trade-offs, I'll talk about that a little bit more. It's not all about schedule, but schedule always matters. So trying to, get new innovation done where there's risk and schedule pressure, huge challenges there. And the technical problem solving typically doesn't go as planned. It doesn't go as fast as people hope. And then one of the challenges with an agile way of working specifically, and I'll talk through this a little bit shortly, is the prototyping aspect. It can be difficult to think differently in terms of what prototyping means with an agile way of working, where with pure software, it's working software. Every iteration, there's working software. We can't really do that with hardware. So there are challenges there where it requires innovation. And, what's the best way to go about prototyping this with the tools we have, and do things iteratively rather than, let's build a big prototype later on when we get there, smaller prototypes along the way. What does that really mean? A lot of challenges there. And then, the last point, the need, because of all the complexity and decisions that need to be made timely, the consensus that's needed, there's strong need for influence and buy-in, and that's the leadership aspect that is often there are gaps there. Strong leaders in an engineering project management environment are rare. And I don't think a lot of people realize the leadership is probably more important than the project management.
Well, certainly if you want to create a repeatable process, or you have a program where, like you said, you have a continual schedule of epics or releases that are moving through. In fact, a lot of organizations now are looking at, it's not just about delivering a project, but really it's a release of features and capabilities. So it's an ongoing program that is running. And in order to do that, it isn't just Herculean effort, get the project across the finish line. You need a team that can also continue to carry and repeat and rinse and repeat. And so, again, that leadership, both standards and process, is helpful. And Gary, I think I was just thinking back when we were, 12 years old when we were on the program management forum back in the mid-2000s. We were dealing with Intel and Tektronix and some of these these programs were not just one and done. Like, I think I remember one of the organizations that we work with, that the project manager was held accountable even after the release date for, it was like a year, for defects or problems that the engineering team had said, hey, we're done, we're throwing it over the fence, sales is going to outsell it. No, the PM actually had to retain resolving and addressing those, couldn't just hand it off to somebody else. So it really is a unique skill set that gets either grown or developed. Frankly, it's fun and fascinating. It's also high stress. But is this some of the things that you guys coach and train people on in how to do this and how to learn how to make a repeatable management process around this?
We do, and that is actually one of the things that I enjoy the most, is helping those cross-functional program leaders, to really develop their abilities and find that balance. There's still a certain amount of technical. There's the program management. There's no clear definition. What's the difference between project management and program management? People debate that all the time. But in my mind, the way you just described it, Tim, that ongoing program. And, there's a roadmap, and there's influence, there's leading a team to go beyond this initial release. A lot of hardware-based systems are run like that. You mentioned Intel and Tektronix. It's, on one hand, most product development is about getting a product into production, but then there's more, and managing the whole program and the skill set that is needed. It's a lot of challenges there, no shortage. I really enjoy helping people at that level, where it's still mostly engineering oriented, because that's the nature of the work. So whether the person came up through engineering or not, it kind of doesn't matter. There's always that complicated engineering aspect, which is part of that program management challenge, to lead, the engineering aspect of it.
Well, You and I have been around long enough to watch trends and cycles kind of recycle themselves, right? We could talk about rapid application development or JRAD, and then, Agile was kind of the hot button topic now. And then we get into, some of this where we talk about, production planning. But I think we talk about the MAD framework. And as we begin looking at how to make these projects successful in an engineering environment, tell us about kind of your experience with this whole process and kind of walk us through. Remember, the idea is that we're really wanting folks to be able to glean, pick up tips, tricks, shortcuts, or where, maybe they're going to completely avoid this or they're going to completely embrace it because it's reinforcing things. But the satisfaction of delivering good results is just amazing, especially when you have a complex project. So walk us through this MAD framework.
Well, first of all, it became obvious to me and my colleagues at Auxilium over 10 years ago that Agile is a better way in general. And the reason is, when you understand it, it's because most environments we need to adapt to what's going on in the world, really. We live in a very dynamic world. We've got, economic conditions changing. We've got people coming and going. We've got priorities changing in businesses. We got priorities changing on projects. Requirements is the typical one. Customers changing requirements. We have to adapt, and we want to adapt efficiently. So Agile, with an iterative approach, call it whatever you want, is really key to being able to adapt efficiently. So being able to have a process to adapt in the most efficient way is really important. And the MAD framework is a very simple way to do that. Certainly there's a lot of detail. We don't have time today, but there are really two things to understand about the MAD framework. There's the initial planning, which we call the on-ramp. It's a sequence of steps for upfront planning to have a big picture view, to have goals, to have some consensus, but do it fast, get going and start learning, and then use iterations to demonstrate progress, make adjustments of your overall plan, and most importantly, really leverage each cycle to make intelligent trade-off decisions based on what you just learned as a team or organization, the new information you have with the right people involved. What's most important now that we've learned? And you do this every cycle, and you're going to make usually minor trade-offs, between schedule, scope, cost, and resources. Typically, big, painful decisions are made near the end of projects. And with an efficient and effective Agile way of working, you want to avoid that, and you want to constantly be making the best decisions with the information that you have.
Gary, you're describing portfolio management, right? So we have a series of portfolios or initiatives you have to prioritize. And one of the hardest things to do in portfolio management is defer, delay, or kill a project, right?
Yes.
And the idea is you can't look at the sunk costs. You have to look going forward. But when you're doing this Agile iteration, in fact, I'm probably stealing some of your key tips for successful engineering, which is coming next. But I think one of the ideas is that if you're doing these iterations, you can do minor course corrections versus, oh my gosh, the Titanic's going to hit, the iceberg, hard left, and everybody's falling out of their racks or their bunks. And yeah, I think that's it is very true. And again, whether it's software development or even construction that's in an Agile process, where you're kind of huddling what worked well, retrospectives, making design trade-offs early on with the customer even, is really kind of an exciting, again, a lot of people love doing Agile work. They hate building schedules, but they love being Agile. And executives go crazy because they're like, are you going to make your schedule? Because it's so iterative.
Right.
I'm not sure when that's going to happen. That's where the leadership communication comes in.
It really does. It's about getting the right stakeholders involved at the right time with the right information and facilitating progress and making those minor adjustments rather than major ones. Absolutely. It's more efficient that way.
Well, let's take a look at some of these tips. I think I was thinking through some of the ones that I had experience, and when I went through the topics you're aligning at here, I was having some horrible flashbacks. And again, even today I was on a call where we had to do some design trade-offs on engineering between an Azure DevOps connector, between project technology, project online, project server. So sometimes you have to think through those things and say, a design trade-off might be helpful. So walk us through some of these and then call out things that you think are really relevant for our audience really to sink their teeth into.
Well, the first one here is really getting alignment on key success factors. The intent of something like a program charter is really supposed to do that, but not all organizations are really successful with that approach. Some charters are too detailed and whatnot. We call this tool an Agile vision brief. But whether you view your way of working as Agile or not, it's really about what's most important to customers and priorities. So this example on the left is an engineering-driven project, where the customers were mostly manufacturing and supply chain. So engineering got to make the call in terms of, in order to satisfy our internal customers, what matters most. And then what would be second, third, and fourth. The example on the right, this forklift project, more a product for a variety of customers or potential customers in a competitive market. What are the decision factors? If they're going to buy a forklift like this, what's most important to them? So those really clear success factors, but especially the priorities to get teams started with the right focus. That's missing on a lot of projects. What is a typical approach is we need to do these 10, 20, 100 things. We have this long list of requirements, and they all matter. And they might, but that's not usually the best place to start with the right focus, right? So really clear, high-level priorities.
Aligning your business goals, like your project or your program, to the organizational or the business goals or the corporate objectives, so that if you do need to prioritize, you can always tie that back to the top. So that's great. I like the vision brief that you have here. Really, it's kind of the charter, if you will, but it really helps to set the top level architecture of what you're driving to.
Yeah, and depending on the organization structure, this would typically be the product manager or a product owner or the program manager. Whoever understands what customers and the business really needs in terms of what success looks like and what the priorities should be. So this is how to start a project with that clarity.
Perfect. Now our favorite topic, Agile, right?
Yeah, well, I am an advocate for an Agile approach, like I said earlier, because it's generally the better way. The only time it's not is when you have a really straightforward project where there's really no need to adapt to anything, usually shorter duration, very straightforward, low-risk projects probably don't need an Agile approach, but that's not typical. It's commonly said that Agile starts with a mindset. And it really is true. And these are four key things to keep in mind from a mindset perspective, going from a waterfall way of working where you've got a detailed plan. You've got usually a detailed work breakdown structure, which turns into a detailed Gantt chart. And you're going to try to follow that detailed plan with a lot of dependencies. Where going to Agile is you still have a plan, but it's higher level and you're going to plan the details as you go, as you learn. So making that shift can be difficult, especially like you said earlier, a lot of managers, they want to see those details up front. They're used to it. Yeah. And they might not be comfortable with this Agile approach. They don't have that mindset. Working in silos is typical because with a detailed plan, everybody knows what to do. You have your mechanical engineers doing this. You got your software engineers doing that. You've got your supply chain folks doing their thing, and et cetera. But an Agile approach is really, ideally, a lot more collaborative across disciplines on an ongoing basis. More so than a weekly meeting kind of thing. You really want to have the environment that feels like we're a team that's all in this together. And a good project manager would drive that and try to build that culture.
We've done at Advisicon, we've done a lot of engineering projects and technical teams and having an academy. But one of the things that we did last year is we recognized that because of COVID and the fact that many times people are working remotely or they're in different countries or different silos, that we wanted to remove that barrier. So we actually moved the whole company to having daily basically stand-up meetings, right, where we actually could come in and take a look at the daily brief. And then we'd have a weekly sprint retrospective where we'd have a planning sprint, we have ceremonies. But we just kind of flipped it around so that people could just quickly highlight, what am I done? What am I wrestling with? What do I need help with? They break that apart. But it is truly, like you said, Gary, that collaboration versus the siloed handoffs creates a much more conducive environment. It also fosters better thinking and better problem solving.
Absolutely. Typically in a waterfall approach, you've got the phase where you're testing, verifying, validating, and it's a long period of development before you validate anything. Where an agile approach, you want to do it in short cycles and constantly doing some sort of validation. Now, that's not the easiest thing to do, and that's something that we help with a lot is, well, what does that look like in an agile way of working so you don't have to, wait until the end of the project before you do any significant validation. Many ways to approach this, but it's a different mindset. It's really a different way of thinking about engineering, especially on the hardware side.
We had an engineer one time say, fail early, fail often. And I said, well, wait a minute, hold a second. How about we just fail early, and fail fast? Like, let's figure out what the problems are first, get them fixed. I don't want to continue to fail often, but the idea is that you're not afraid to do small, bite-sized changes, figure out what your mistakes are, learn from them, and apply that. And again, like you said, it isn't, hey, we're 3 years out and then we release a product and then we talk to everybody what they want and go away for 3 years and do that like has been done with Microsoft and Apple and other companies. Now it's very much a shorter cycle to value, time to market, right?
Well, because I was an electronics engineer, I can relate to this. And, electronics engineers that don't have Agile experience, the way they think about their work is typically, let's say they're designing electronics. They have to do a schematic. Then they have to lead the layout of a circuit board. And each of those can take many, many months. So it's like, well, I can't really do anything significant in a short cycle. It's going to take many months. And that's their mindset. I need to do this big chunk of work that takes months. Then I need to do this big chunk of work. What they don't seem to think about naturally is every day they have a plan to do something. And the challenge and the mindset that has to happen first is that I'm going to commit to my peers that I'm collaborating closely with now that I'm actually going to do X, Y, and Z in this short cycle of work, rather than working for months in their silo before anybody really sees anything. So that's a major change for a lot of people. And then I already touched on this last one is, really leveraging an iterative process to make those trade-off decisions, smaller ones on a cadence rather than, bigger decisions in a crisis.
Absolutely. So, I see a spreadsheet, I get really excited. I see a project schedule, I get really excited. But to talk to us about this prioritization of work items, because managing tasks or details can live in lots of different places, but talk about some best practices here.
Well, so on the left, prioritized user stories is a common Agile approach. But what it really is what is the customer or group of customers? What do they want and why? What are they trying to achieve with your solution? And it's usually quite a long list, and they should be prioritized. And in an Agile way of working, a common role, the name of the role is product owner. And I like that because they're the person who, in theory, should really own it. They understand what the customers and the business needs, and they are really just describing it. We have this person or group of people that need something for a reason, and they need something else for a reason. and they're prioritized based on what that group of customers and the business needs. And it really is, in theory, that simple. But a lot of organizations struggle with this because their senior leadership isn't usually willing to let somebody really own a product, whatever you call the role. So typical product managers in the hardware space often don't really know their customers that well. A lot of times it's because they haven't been in the role for very long, or because the situation's really complicated. And, so the typical approach is to try to learn about the market and then come with a set of requirements, where this approach is start off with what you know, prioritize it, give that to the team, and then the prioritized work items are really all that cross-discipline work that's really about satisfying those user stories. And one of the main differences between hardware-based and software product development, for software, user stories are often the same as a feature. And so whoever's coding it can say, oh, I can code that in the next 2 weeks, and they can just pull the user story from the backlog and start working on it. With hardware, it's usually a range of things. It's mechanics, electronics, and software, and other things that have to work together. And it's important to understand that, but it's a variety of work items typically that are needed to fulfill that. So typically, product management's responsibility is to make sure these user stories are getting fulfilled as the team does their work through organized, prioritized work items.
And of course, with Agile, is getting to value quickly, or getting to the most value as quickly as possible, is just part of a strong Agile delivery. So I like this next tip, talking about visibility to progress, because as an executive, I also like to know that things are moving ahead. And sometimes we need to see proof of life, like is actually something being done here. So talk about this in an engineering environment and the real importance for, especially if you're kind of moving forward and showing value.
Well, and this is a good way to think about prototypes, maybe a little differently for some folks. What you don't want to do in any way of working, whatever you call it, is just kind of status report kind of stuff. Here's the status of our project. Important, but not too engaging compared to visible, tangible work that people can see. This example here was a real forklift product development project where the team started with a number of different prototype brochures. This is what might be in a brochure describing our product and its capabilities. And then it took quite a while because of the complexity, but then they moved to simulated 3D video. And it was really, because it needed to be realistic, it was many iterations of refining that so that people could say, oh, this is what I like and this is what I don't like about what you're demonstrating, from a simulation perspective. And then getting to the point where subsystems are actually prototyped, with the steering and controls and other parts of the whole machine. And then at the end, several iterations of a full working prototype. Actually, the project manager in all cases would show this to the audience, but even more exciting near the end, where it's like on the manufacturing floor, seeing the demonstration of the product in action, getting out of the conference room and into the area where the work is being done is often, really helpful to get people engaged.
Well, just touching it, right? I mean, I used to drive a forklift when I was in the military. I was at a CB, and we would unload freight and docks, and we used to pick up quarters and have games with it. But being able to touch it, tangibly see it, creates value, especially like you said, if it's a brochure. I love how a brochure to a 3D model to actually some innovative working. And then at some point, it's right there. This is what we're engineering. Gets people excited. Like they can actually see this, not just the team itself, right? Customers, right? Some of the engagement model or, shipping and manufacturing who aren't part of the engineering team might be looking, oh, wow, we need to actually do something different to ship or model this, right? Those are things that you'll begin engaging in those cross-functional teams for.
Yeah, and I think in this example, it's typical of a lot of situations where that 3D video simulation, it needed to be realistic, not just smoke and mirrors. So to really make a simulation or whatever approach you're taking, realistic is important. And there are challenges there. This particular team spent a lot of time refining that because of that being important. It needed to really be realistic.
All
right.
right.
This last tip just expands on that. And, more from a project management perspective, we've got our project management tools that we use for visualizing our project, whether it's physical whiteboard and sticky notes, or an online whiteboard of some sort, or Excel or Microsoft Project, or a number of tools together. The challenge to really engage stakeholders and get their feedback is to make it useful from their perspective, so that they can understand it, they can interact with it somehow. It's enough information that it's useful, but it's also concise so that especially executives and people who aren't that intimate with the project, they understand what's going on. So really leveraging the tools to get along with what you're demonstrating as a visual to really maximize the engagement and get the feedback that you take into the next iteration, and do that every cycle. You're demonstrating progress, you're showing project management status in an engaging way, and you're getting the feedback and constantly refining your plan.
Excellent. Well, again, I think it's the pairing of, like you said, details with visuals that helps people who learn and see things differently. So I know there's a lot of questions that come up, certainly around, what you can do, how can you do better at engineering project management, or if you're getting put into that role. And I think I also want to kind of always highlight that, in this session, this video, we're here kind of touching some of the key points, but this is a deep industry. And so there's other learning opportunities that you can point people to as well. So let's just kind of go through some common questions that come up and maybe just talk about the question and the answer.
Well, the first one with Agile methodology. Agile is a word, it's a buzzword that's misunderstood by a lot of people. And a lot of trainers tell people, well, you need to have these new roles. You have to have a scrum master and a product owner and maybe a lot of other roles. No, the roles can be 100% the same. The responsibilities might change a bit with an Agile way of working, but there really is no reason to create new roles or change the names of them. And most importantly, leadership needs the right mindset so that teams can be successful with the Agile methodology. You're doing it for a reason. You're trying to make, improvements. You're trying to accomplish something, and leaders need to have the right mindset to drive that. The user story is another common Agile approach, to the point where it's ridiculous in some cases, where teams were trained that they have to write a user story for every capability in the product, including how pieces of hardware talk to each other. Like as a semiconductor device, I need this, and this in order to talk to another piece of electronics. And people put a lot of time into writing user stories for this kind of stuff. No, user stories can be valuable for understanding customer needs, but not necessary. It depends on the starting point. A lot of teams, they have a way of working, a process that starts with a lot of requirements definition. No need to change that. You can still leverage Agile methods and be efficient about adapting with any approach in terms of how you're defining what customers need and want. So you don't have to write user stories.
Right.
Working prototype, already talked about that. No, anything that demonstrates visible, tangible progress on a cadence is all good. But there are Agile trainers that will tell hardware people, because they don't know any better, every iteration you have to have working hardware. That's not going to fly with most.
No, not in engineering.
And this last one, I'm kind of tough on project managers. I like to help project managers be successful, but it's a tough job. And when you have, challenges with people, especially senior leadership or key stakeholders who aren't really doing what they should, ideally, participating in demos, important meetings, being engaged, giving the clear direction. If that's not happening, it really is, from my perspective, the project manager's job to facilitate that. That's one of the difficult aspects of project management. When people aren't really behaving, especially senior leaders, you can't make them, but it's your job to facilitate it. So,
right. Speaking truth to power sometimes is a scary thing, right? Hey, look, you're not doing what I need you to do. Or, hey, when we started this out, you agreed you would do this. But it helps be the referee, keep people in bounds, make sure everyone's doing and there's expectations. It is a really important function, even as complex engineering is. There's never a dull moment, I'm sure.
No, and it's the leadership aspect, which we have.
Speaking of learning opportunities, where can somebody go to learn more? Because again, Gary, you and I have written books, we have authored, we've taught for decades, we have a lot of experience. And so how can anyone watching this webinar quickly go and continue to dig deeper to learn? Go ahead and walk us through this.
Well, we've got these QR codes. If you use those, you can see our online scheduled workshops. There aren't that many right now. I'm doing all of these because I continue to be committed to doing open to the public sessions. The Agile Project Management Bootcamp and the Leadership for Engineers are the two most popular courses there. And then we have what we call our Agile Engineering Leadership Program, which is really a pretty comprehensive series of 2-hour modules. We found that 2 hours in an online format is a good session. So we can make each of those 2-hour sessions a topic. And the way this works is tailor a workshop by choosing the topics that are most valuable to your team. And typically, the 2-hour modules are they're the sweet spot for online delivery. These can be done in person as well. And we have quite a catalog that you can find with this link and QR code.
Perfect. And Gary, I know that on your website, you guys actually are also doing webinars as well. So I want to encourage people to check out Gary's website. If you are doing engineering projects, or even if you're touching part of an engineering project, it's helpful to really understand some of the complexities, but also to improve some of the skill sets. So Gary, again, I just can't say enough. It's been always great to connect with you, and over the years, kind of to stay in touch. And I've really appreciated a kind of chance to collaborate from kind of different ends of the project management, engineering, and of course the Agile spectrum. So Gary's got certainly content on his website, and please do check that out. Again, for all of you at Advisicon, or at least people who are watching, is that we do have YouTube videos. And of course, if you're looking for PDUs, there will be PDUs for this webinar in our learning management portal. So again, also free to the public. Just want to encourage people to maximize their learning. And again, if you're at the beginning of your career, you're in the middle, or you've got promoted to a level of project management or engineering leadership, that there is lots of opportunities. So thank you for your time, everyone. And I appreciate it. Hope this was helpful, and reach out anytime with any questions. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.